Today, we're going to talk about a pretty radical idea about addiction from the psychiatrist Gerald G. May. What if I told you that addiction isn't just about drugs or alcohol or some kind of moral failing? What if it's actually something we all experience? A powerful, fundamental force that might just point us toward our deepest spiritual longings.
May was a psychiatrist who kind of hit a wall. He found that all his training, all his scientific methods, they just weren't enough to get to the heart of what addiction really is. And that frustration led him to this wild conclusion. What if addiction isn't just a sickness we need to cure, but a sacred disease? A kind of misplaced spiritual search that, if we could just understand it, might actually lead us back home.
So, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we're going to redefine what addiction even is. Then, we'll look at the psychological cycle that keeps us stuck and the hard science of what's happening in the brain. From there, we'll explore May's really surprising solution, something he calls grace. And finally, we'll see what it means to look at recovery not as a cure, but as a homecoming.
All right, first things first, we have to completely blow up our old definition of addiction. Because for May, this has very little to do with just drugs or alcohol. It's way more common and a lot more subtle, and it's happening in all of our lives.
Okay, so this is the core idea, and it's a total game changer. Mays says it's not about what you're attached to, it's about the attachment itself. Addiction is any compulsive thing you do that ultimately makes you less free. It's what happens when our natural, totally normal human desire for meaning and connection gets hijacked and latched onto something, well, something that can't ever really deliver.
And this wasn't just some academic theory for him. It was deeply personal. He realized that when his methods weren't curing his patients, the deep depression he felt wasn't just disappointment. No, it was actually withdrawal. He was addicted to being successful, to being the guy in control who could fix people.
And this is where it really hits you. The book lists hundreds of things we can get addicted to. Some are obvious, sure, like food or TV, but some are really subtle, like being addicted to stress, to perfection, to being right, or even to feeling guilty. As you just watch this list fly by, the point is pretty clear. From May's perspective, nobody gets a pass. We're all in this boat together.
Okay, so an obvious question pops up right here. What about being addicted to something good? You know, like helping people, or being a great parent, or fighting for a cause you believe in? Surely those have to be good, right?
Well, May's answer is a hard no, and his reasoning is crystal clear. He says the second something becomes a compulsion, it's no longer about a free act of love. It becomes a need. It shifts from something you choose to something you're a slave to. And true connection, he argues, has to be freely chosen.
So how in the world do we get so tangled up in this stuff? Let's take a look at the psychological trap, the vicious cycle that our own minds build to keep us stuck.
May lays out this cycle that probably sounds pretty familiar. It starts with stuff like, oh, I'll deal with it tomorrow. Then you try to stop and you fail. And you try again and you fail again. That leads to this feeling of defeat, this, I guess I just can't handle it. But here's the real twist. The most dangerous part of the whole cycle, May says, is when pride kicks in. That moment when you think, you know what? I can handle this. That very illusion of control is what sets you up for the fall.
And oh man, our minds are sneaky. They are masters of justification. May points out this classic trick of rationalization. You know, the workaholic thinks, well, at least I'm not an alcoholic. The alcoholic thinks, well, at least I'm not a junkie. We basically protect our own attachments by looking down on someone else's.
But look, this isn't just a mind game. It's not just in our heads, psychologically speaking. These patterns are physically wired into the hardware of our brains. So let's shift from the software to the hardware. May has this brilliant, super simple way of explaining this. Think about using decongestant nose spray. If you use it too much, your nose literally adapts. It stops making its own decongestant chemicals, and pretty soon you need the spray not to feel clear, but just to feel normal. That right there is the essence of physical addiction. So here you can see what's actually happening on a chemical level. Normally, your brain is trying to keep everything in a nice, natural balance, but the addiction comes along and tips the scales. So what does the brain do? It adapts. It creates a whole new normal, where it now needs the addictive thing just to feel balanced at all.
And that's why withdrawal is so brutal. When you take the substance or behavior away, the brain basically freaks out. It's been working so hard to compensate that when the thing is gone, the scales swing violently in the other direction. That neurological whiplash, that crisis, that's what we feel as withdrawal.
So, wow, this is kind of a tough spot, right? Our own minds are tricking us, our brains are betraying us, and the very thing we think is supposed to save us, our willpower, that I can handle it attitude, is actually part of the trap. It seems hopeless, so if we can't handle it, what's left?
And this is where the whole thing pivots. This brings us to the absolute core of May's argument, and it's a solution that comes from completely outside of ourselves. He calls it grace. Now, when we hear the word grace, a lot of us might think it's something you have to earn, like a reward for being good. But that's not it at all. May describes it as this active, dynamic force. It's a pure gift. The key here is that it's a power that can actually change us, and it works completely outside of our own struggling and striving.
This comparison right here is everything. Willpower is you all alone trying to push a giant boulder up a hill, and most of the time, you're gonna lose. Grace, on the other hand, starts when you finally admit you can't push the boulder. Now, this is so important. It's not about surrendering to the addiction. It's about surrendering the lie that you are in control, and in doing so, opening yourself up to a power that's way bigger than you are.
And here's the wild part. You can't force it. You can't muscle your way to grace. May says it usually finds us when we're caught off guard. Not when we're trying really hard and trying to manage everything, but in those quiet moments, maybe even moments of failure, when we finally just stop trying to handle it all by ourselves.
Okay, so this all sounds great, but what does it actually look like day to day? This final part is all about seeing this not as a quick fix, but as a lifelong journey. The whole goal shifts. It's not about getting cured once and for all. It's about starting a homecoming. A long, patient process of gently turning that powerful river of desire, the exact same energy that fuels our addictions, back to where it was always meant to flow. And to help us on this path, May gives us 5 guideposts. And he's super clear. These are not rules to follow to earn grace. Think of them more as practices that help keep the door open for it. Being brutally honest with ourselves, treating ourselves with dignity, finding community, taking responsibility, and embracing a simpler life.
And this all leads to what is, I think, the most profound and beautiful idea in the whole book. That deep, nagging restlessness inside all of us that drives our addictions. May says that's not a flaw. That's not a sign you're broken. It's actually a sign of something profoundly right about you. It is your true treasure, this sacred, unquenchable thirst for the infinite that is planted deep in your soul.
So I'll just leave you with this. What if that gnawing emptiness, that constant compulsive reaching for more work, more likes, more distraction, more whatever, what if that isn't a problem that needs to be fixed, but a sacred echo? What if your deepest dissatisfaction is actually calling you home?